right, so we're going to get started with our bag by first working on the two front and back pieces of the bag. The material is canvas, so first we're going to overcast the edges so they don't unravel. Then we'll be stitching the decorative stitches that you see here on the bag. But before we do any of that, it's time to turn on the machine and wind the bobbin. And then we're going to make sure that you look at the manual for the proper threading paths for the thread. So we install the thread there, and then we're going to follow it around. And then I've got an empty bobbin here. And then I'm putting it on the machine. I'm engaging the bobbin so that it will wind without the needle going up and down. And then I have two options for actually winding the bobbin. The first one is to use the start-stop button, and the second one is to use the foot control. First, I'm going to use the foot control just to get it started, and then I'm trimming this little tail right here. Now, because I just want to wind, I'm going to push the stop-start button here until the bobbin's full. And then once the bobbin's full, I'm going to press the stop-start button again to remove the bobbin and cut it loose. And then I'll be ready to load it down below. Okay, now that we've wound our bobbin, we're going to thread the needle. So we have to disengage the thread from our bobbin guide. We still leave it through this path, but we're going to go down. The tension discs are in here, so we're going to go down through the tension discs, and then to the right, and then the left of the thread take up. Then once we're through that, it's time to go through the needle. Our upper path is threaded. Now it's time to load the bobbin that we wound. I'm going to slip off the bobbin door. If you're unsure of how to do the threading, the path is printed right here on the bobbin cover. So we're going to put the bobbin in. I like to think of P for put the bobbin in. It's a little silly, but it works for me. And so we're going to follow the arrow guides that are here in the bobbin area on the machine. There's a little thread cutter down there. So then you cut. And then we're going to replace the cover. The first stitch that we're going to do on the canvas part of our bag is going to be overcasting. So now it's necessary to use foot E, which comes with the machine, to do that. It's got a guide that allows you to butt the fabric right up against the edge of the guide, and it will give you a perfect overcasting stitch. Changing the feet, there's a button on the back of the foot. We're just going to press that, and the foot comes off. We're just going to put the new foot in place. When you turn your machine on, it's going to start off with a straight stitch with the center needle position. But because we're doing the overcasting stitch first, we're going to be using a zigzag stitch. We're going to simply select 5 because that is our zigzag stitch, and then it changes on the screen. There's some other things on the screen to be mindful of. There is the stitch length and the stitch width indicators. Both can be changed to your liking. There's also a recommended presser foot to use, and also a thread tension range, which is here at the top of the machine. Other things to be mindful of is that we have our category represented here. So we're in the practical stitch menu, which means that any of these stitches are active and we can just direct select. So we're using the zigzag stitch to overcast the edges of the canvas bag. So I'm going to take the raw edge of the material and line it up to the guide that I showed you on foot number E. And it's very easy to complete the stitching with the guide in place. And I'm going to complete this stitching along all the perimeters of both pieces of the front and back of the bag. All right, now that I've finished overcasting the edges of my pieces, you can see here how that saved the edges from unraveling, and I'm ready to move on to the decorative stitching. So let me show you which ones that I used and how to select them. I selected stitch number 5 earlier by simply just pressing 5 because that's the stitch that I wanted. But now I want to do some more of the decorative stitching that you see up here. So for this project, I decided to use stitch number 65, which is pictured here. And to do any of the decorative stitches, they're categorized by a letter. So we've got A, B, and the C areas. So I'm going to select on my button on the front of the screen here, this A button, and then I'm going to use these arrows to navigate to the appropriate directory. And in that case, it's this one. I select it, and now I'm going to just type in the stitch number 65. So this is great. What a little bit about this information screen is that you get to preview a picture of the stitch, plus you also get to see the stitch length and the stitch width. I'm really happy with the stitch width, so I don't want to change that, but I do want to change my stitch length, and I'm going to change that to 3.5. Okay, so now we're finally ready to sew, and I want to just remind you that I've changed out the thread. So I've got a little bit of a darker thread and an embroidery thread this time, and I've also changed the bobbin and the foot. So now the best part about this particular process is that we don't have to stitch a straight line. We can just kind of be freeform with this. So I'm going to use the foot control to get started. So I'm continuing with this stitch for 2 rows. And then once the second row is completed, you're finished with this stitch, and then I'm going to move on to another one. So I've switched to another stitch, which is stitch number 71, and I'm going to sew that 2 more times. I also want to comment that I increased the stitch width on this to 3.0. All right. I've completed the first side of my bag. So you can see here that I've got a good foundation for appliquing my Chicago skyline. But I need to make another one of these. So what I'm going to do, because I'm kind of a little bit of a perfectionist, is I am going to mark my other piece so that I start my horizon lines in the same spot and end in the same spot over here, so that when you put them together they match up.